Hello, guys, and welcome back to Time Under Tension. You are stepping back into our current series on mind, body, spirit. And this week, we're going to be diving into body. But just as a bit of a recap, last episode, we talked about the mind and how the mind is, in a way, a tool we can use, one perspective in that triad that can influence the other aspects, and the thoughts that we choose to live out of have an impact on not only our mental experience but also our physical responses. What did you get out of last episode? What stood out to you?
Yeah, when I went back in and listened to some of it, the biggest piece that I took away that I also implement into my current experience of growth and what I am doing from a mental performance coaching perspective is just how much our mental patterns are creating our reality and how much our mental patterns will therefore create our future. So for me, the biggest piece of reflection is, what are my thoughts? What are my beliefs? Are those thoughts and beliefs really serving who I say in my personal philosophy that I want to be and show up as? Or do they need a little bit of some upgrading? Like, whose thoughts are those, and how can I go about really focusing on pattern recognition in terms of my mindset and be able to shift those to create the reality that I hope to live in?
And I think that's the difference between two people who are in a really similar situation and have completely different experiences of it. I have several clients in prep right now, and I have some who they embrace the suck and they're like, I'm going to show up and be better than ever. And I'm pushing myself and I'm so proud of myself for developing this discipline. And like, even on the hard days, like I just find the next right thing to do. And that's an awesome mindset because not only are they going to progress, but their experience is so much more positive and they're embracing growth throughout the process. Whereas I have other clients who doubt themselves every single day, and the conversation is constantly around, I don't know if I can do this. I'm not sure I'm going to be ready. You know, maybe I should just drop out now. What do you think? Like, just constant insecurity. And the thing is, I think we all have that insecurity. So it's not like those who are champions in the world don't. If you listen to someone like David Goggins, he talks about how he was like the least capable person. Like he really looked down on himself in the way that he ended up pushing himself. It's not that we don't have insecurities, but it's that we don't allow them to drive us. We reframe the story, and that changes our experience of the same external situation. So we have all the power in our hands to shape our lives in the direction that we want to live. Even if we can't always change all of the external circumstances, we can change our internal experience.
Totally. And I think, again, for me, in hearing you, this is how we can really connect this to the physical body. Because when I think about how this is showing up in my life, it's in my relationships. It's in my relationship with myself, like you just mentioned, but also how it shows up in our relationship, how it shows up in my relationship with God, how it shows up in my relationship to the world itself. Like, do I believe the universe is for me, or do I believe that things are happening to me? It's all of these things are all relationships. And knowing that my patterns mentally are immediately impacting and creating my current reality, that's going to cause this ease or dis-ease of the body. And that's kind of what I had heard in a podcast, was like the true definition of health. And what the goal of this woman was to create health by her definition, which was creating more ease in the body by removing the source of the dis-ease or disease, which is the mental pattern that's creating the reality that's causing the despair. That's then causing your inner body to actually have a chemical reaction that's creating a lot more cortisol. It's causing a lot more fight or flight in terms of your nervous system regulation. There's so much of the body that's immediately responding to the thoughts that you think. That, and then in my relationship point of view, is I'm going to insert into my fight or flight mode and get defensive in my relationship with you if my thought patterns are focused on either what happened to me before, a past experience, and I hadn't taken myself out of that and really changed the thought to match who I know that you are, or it's like I'm thinking that I'm unsafe right now and I'm going to just allow that to create my reality. Then my whole body is like blocked off. I'm hot. I'm getting like actual physically red because I'm gaining this body temperature from my thoughts about what's actually happening in my reality. That's then causing this energy exchange with the person that I'm with. So I just think, tying it back into, okay, your mental pattern is literally causing your disease in the body. I think there's some truth to that.
Definitely. And I think that we should be actively working all the time to look at the thoughts that are shaping our lives. And when we have emotional reactions like that, physiological responses like that, that point back to an emotional reaction, I think it's important to dig back to the story or the thought that precipitated that, and not just what the other person did. If there was another person in the situation who, like, quote, triggered you, or if something external triggered you, but then going to the thought after that, what happened in your brain after that point. But I also think there's times when we need to use the body to shift our mind. And
I sent that
it
too.
isn't it isn't just a one-way street. We have these different entry points for shifting our experience. And personally, I would say my favorite is probably the body. As someone who gets caught in my head a lot, sometimes I can have all of these things going on in my head, and I might be reframing stories in my mind and actively working on creating a positive experience. But there are times when sometimes that the thought doesn't completely change what's happening from an external expression standpoint. So I might be thinking, oh, my values are these things, but if I'm not acting out of that, I'm still not in alignment. So I need to make sure that I'm exerting myself physically the way that I want to show up in this world, even if my feelings don't always follow that, because that will still send a message back to myself that, I am this kind of person. I am in alignment with my values. I am proactively pursuing these things, or whatever it is that I'm trying to do.
Yeah, there's communication with the mind and the body. And sometimes the mind needs to listen to the body, and sometimes the body needs to listen to the mind. And it's really interesting, the relationship between the two. But do you want to kind of cover maybe a broader scope of just how much there is that goes into this part of the triad when in regards to the body, kind of give an overview of the multiple different aspects of what goes into whole being wellness when it comes to the physical body?
Yeah. So I think that there's a lot of different ways to approach this. I think for me, habits, instilling good habits or practices, because habits are usually more instinctual. We're doing them without really thinking about them. But practices that allow me to show up as my best self, even if my feelings aren't always there. I think that's one way. I think that there's some tangible things that we can use, like tools such as breathing. You've talked about using like ice packs and things like that, cold water, to change our physical state and thereby impact our mental state. And I think even something like physical exercise can really change our mental state. The way that we eat can change our mental state. The people that we surround ourselves with. There's a lot of different ways to kind of branch into this. And next week, I definitely want to dig into like specific techniques that you guys can try to implement into your life and see, can you get into that mindset shift But I think it's important to understand first why it's effective and how you can start to think about it in your day-to-day life. So how is this something that's
Yeah.
shown up for you?
Yeah, definitely. I think just I wanted to hear your side because I think we kind of come at this from two different angles and it's really cool. You're definitely, I mean, your work is literally centered around being able to transform the body. And what you've really sculpted your practice into is, yes, the body might be the initial focal point, but there is so much more happening when it comes to being able to listen to the body. Like, what is the body telling you? What kind of conversation, what's the conversation like between the mind and the body and the spirit? The spirit lives in the body, you know? There's also this, okay, let's do some real deep dive on your energy expenditure. Do you have enough energy physically to actually fight the mental battles? Are you exhausting yourself too much by doing instead of being able to find balance from doing and being? It's like, how do you view your temple, your body? What is your perception of that and its significance, to all the way down to like, how do you fuel? What is your fueling like? And how can we really start to understand that the body is the temple in which our truest being, our spirit, lives in? So it's just been so cool to hear where you kind of started with all of this in your personal practice to now where you've taken it, and the wide, like massive variety of ways in which we can address whole being wellness through the body. For me, the way it shows up is just a little bit different because I'm much more centered around the mind in my scope of work. And so when I think about trauma, I think about our bodies, I think about polyvagal theory. I think about how we have information that's coming up, bottom up approach, and how when we do think of something, back to the relationship example, our bodies are letting us know that this environment in our past has been an unsafe place to be. So it's not about changing your thoughts to change the body all the time. There's also this very important dynamic of, okay, trauma is stored in the body. So we have a lot of different areas of need that need to be released from the body. There's even down to when you're doing like mobility and flexibility, that's contributing to your way of life. Are you immobile in your physical body? Because you're probably immobile in your ability to change and grow and adapt in a situation. So just really seeing how much my body has been something I have not treasured as this very sacred part of me that has way more information than the knowledge I've gained in my life on this earth. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point, is it's not just about doing the hard thing. I think I get in that mindset as more of like, which I know you're an athlete as well. I just think your studies have been more in the mind and trauma, but like, all right, how do I push myself to do the thing that I don't necessarily want to do, or emotionally and not in a positive place to do, but know that when I do that thing physically, my mind will follow, my mood will follow my action. But I think there's that other side of it that you're saying where there's also trauma involved, and we have to like work with the body and honor the body and be gentle with the body, because it's our vessel, and it's not just this thing we're renting out and going to run into the ground. I mean, we can do that, but it's part of who we are, and it's a mirror to the world, and it's the first thing people engage with when they meet us, and it says so much about us. And I think you can meet older people, especially because we kind of wear our lives on our body. You can tell when you meet some like grumpy old man, and they're just hard and rigid and inflexible, and their hearts are really hard, and you can tell from their exterior. And then on the same note, you can meet some like sweet little wrinkly old lady who's like just the sweetest person, and you can just feel the warmth from her heart. You can tell that they've lived out that story and it shows in their bodies. And so when we look at our body is like our canvas. It wears the choices that we make, it wears the mindset that we adopt, and we can choose how we present ourselves, both based on mentally how we shape our lives, but also physically how we live it, how we treat ourselves, how we process our trauma, and everything in between.
How do you view your body? I think is such an important question to ask yourself, because you're talking about productivity and you're talking about taking action, and all of those things happen by way of your physiology taking you from A to B. But if we're not taking into account what our physiology, what our body is trying to inform us of, that's when we completely remove our being. And so I just think, what's the balance? All of this that we're talking about is about learning how to create balance. And it's also this concept that's not concrete. It's super, it adapts to what we need. Like, there are going to be seasons where we're really struggling because we're processing a ton of emotional trauma. That's taking energy out of your physical body. When you're processing emotional trauma, that is equally as much of a stressor, if you want to say, on the body as going and doing a workout or a lift. There are instances where we have to understand that this vehicle that we are in, that's going to take us around to live out this habit of purpose that we all have, it's letting us know what we can and can't do. That is where seasons of life are really going to allow for, like right now for you, you've had a ton more energy lately. You had a season where you really worked through, okay, I know my body needs more fuel to be able to do all of the things I want, because I want to lift and I want to do jujitsu and I want to be able to be social and go out and have more connection. It's like all of those things are requiring energy. And if we are stuck in, whether it's for me, I can speak to an unhealthy eating behavior, or, really focusing so much on my physical exertion from a lifting and a cardio and a workout perspective, I don't have this balance of the three that's allowing me to live in this wholeness of joy and fullness and tranquility almost. It's like I'm pushing my body so far in this one area that I don't have enough energy to be social. So I'm literally not getting fulfilled in the way that I need, because we're literally meant to connect with others. So it's just like, just know that this is not an A plus B equals C kind of a conversation. It's like, let's just understand that all three of these are like yin and yang plus a third. Like, we're all this just like floating thing that really needs to just be aware of what we're currently going through in the season, and being able to provide ourselves enough fuel, enough energy from whether that's you need to recharge, you need to eat more, you need to take an off day once a week, you need to make sure you go out and get social connection to provide energy. Are you focusing on your breath? Things like that. All of this is going to be a balancing act that you're just able to really start to understand and learn the communication between the two or three things.
Right. And I think the only way to foster that communication is practice. And personally, I think creating awareness through check-ins, journaling, something like, I can tell I have more energy now than I did 2 months ago, not because I have some great internal meter. It's because I can look back at my journal and see, oh, okay, like I was running out of energy in the middle of the day. I didn't ever want to socialize. I was getting really burned out in my workouts. My joints were hurting all the time. To like, oh, I'm like biking to the gym now and going to jiu-jitsu and feeling good and enjoying my social interactions and feeling strong in the gym. And that's a great indicator, but I only know that because I've been tracking that. So if there's something in your life that you want to improve, you need to be tracking those things and then honoring what that season is bringing you. Because like you said, like there are seasons for things. And that season where I was struggling with lower energy, there were other things I had to be working on as a person then. And now I'm learning a new level of balance where there's more on my plate, but I'm demonstrating more responsibility and my ability to balance these things. But balancing is like you're like on the balance beam and you're catching balls, and like it's the weight is shifting as you move forward, and sometimes you're just going to tumble over, and then you're going to have to just get back on and like find your new way to balance. Like balance isn't this static thing that we establish and then maintain. It's always changing. The demands on our lives are always changing, because in life, like we're being progressively overloaded. When we show that we can be responsible, we show, all right, I've done really effective work at my job, we might get more responsibility. Then we have to learn what balance looks like with that. Oh, I want to take my fitness to the next level. All right, I have more responsibility or more on my plate, more physical demands. Now I got to understand what balance looks like in this season. Oh, we're going to start a family. What does balance look like in this season? And like you can use your body to shape your mind. Like for me, I am not a fan of cardio, but I've been pushing myself to do it. And I found that I get momentum once I start doing it. I don't feel like it when I go into it. And that's one way that I'm using my body to shape my mind. But on the other side of that, I have to still check in with myself at the end of the day and go, how am I feeling? How am I recovering? What is my resting heart rate? How's my HRV? How are my joints feeling? It's not just like, oh yeah, I'm grinding and I'm disciplined and I'm adding all of this stuff on my plate. It's like still being able to come back and say, okay, am I showing up as the person that I want to be? Am I having enough energy to get through my day? Am I, seeing negative coping patterns come up? Because that's usually a sign that I'm overloaded in some area. So it's like finding that balance and that ebb and flow with yourself through pushing and constant reflection and just going back and forth between the two.
Yep, totally. I thought that was beautifully put. The thing that came up in my mind is like there's like two buckets we're talking about here. One is like your physiology and how you can impact that from tracking and journaling and sleep and eating, working out, fitness, like, and then there's this other like the body has been through a lot of things that are really causing an effect on the current reality that you're living from a mindset perspective and an experience of others' perspective. That's why I think there needs to be a couple episodes on the body, because there's so much that goes into the body from an inner world perspective, from an outer perspective, and how you can influence the body. One of the things that came up in my mind that I think is important to talk about as well is like sex is a thing that a lot of us as human beings enter into without being super mindful of the experience of the body or how we're using our body in that way, or what's the experience like, or maybe something happened in that particular area to your body, and thinking about the experiences that we're putting ourselves in is so important to our overall ability to process and to create and to build the future that we want. It's everything is happening inside of this body that we have, and seeing it as something that's extremely sacred to take care of and to prioritize without having it be this thought process of needing to look a certain way. It's not necessarily about aesthetics. It's about experiencing it radically honestly experiencing your body for what's truly happening inside from one bucket or the other. That's why I think starting with the mind is so important, because if we don't address the skill of being able to step outside of the thought and step outside of the belief and really understand that we have this power of taking a step back and really seeing what it is that's coming up. Without that tool, we're never going to be able to hear our bodies talking to us about anything. And we're never going to be able to separate from old beliefs, other people's beliefs, what we think we should do versus what we actually need. And that's why I think the mind is like the first thing that has to be transformed first as you start to build your actual realization, or maybe just a true representation of where you're actually at in your relationship with your body.
That's great. So when in your own process, how are you processing through what's going on in your body and maybe finding the balance between those things that maybe I lean into more, which is like, all right, let's use nutrition, let's use fitness, let's use habits to kind of shape our mindset. And then that other side of the coin where you're saying, let's listen to what our body is telling us and respect that and allow that to guide the process a little bit. How do you have a reflection process?
Yeah, I would say I have a reflection process. I would say I'm wrestling more with currently with my feelings being very much the dictator of my decisions right now. And I think it's because I'm fatigued and I'm tired. And so, like, now that I've gotten to this place in my mind where I'm so capable of stepping outside and really being able to reflect, I'm still working on I'm feeling a particular way in my body, and I need to connect that to more of the physiology. It's not always like something's I'm doing something out of alignment in my life, or I'm not on the right track, and like the negative self-talk will insert itself when I'm fatigued, and it'll start to create these narratives about what my body's feeling. Whereas I'm now learning, okay, I'm able to see that. I'm able to see the story I'm creating, step outside and be like, I really am not doing the best job of figuring out how to get enough fuel in my day with a really busy work schedule. And this happened when I was coaching as well. As a coach, all coaches who know collegiate athletics, you're just not really on a regulated schedule ever. And that really took me out of my best self. And I'm kind of seeing it show up again. I'm overloading myself with work, doing both of these jobs. And I'm seeing how that's affecting my physiology in the day. What that's doing to my mind? And then actively seeing, okay, what is just one step, like talking to you about it? What is one step I can do to really start to give my body the energy it needs and let go of the feelings I have that are being created by the story or the narrative I have in my mind. I went to go see uh, a chiropractor because of my shoulder. And the thing about that is there's so much more that wasn't even aware of from a trauma perspective that was living in my body, but it was causing this complete like misalignment of my entire structural torso. And so for me, it's like I tend to go so far in the what am I doing wrong? Because if I'm hurt or, I don't feel good, that means that I'm wrong and I have something in my life that's wrong and I need to change. Instead of being like, I need to prioritize fueling myself in the day first before I go sharing all these, like thinking all of these narratives about myself and feeling despair. I also need to step outside my feelings and be very radically honest with myself. Am I stretching enough? Am I doing my mobility? Am I doing my shoulder exercises? Am I taking an off day? Because when I get stressed, I don't take off days. So it's like that for me, my process is so much more about remove the narrative, step outside, and truly see what I may need from an actual interacting with my physiology, nutrition, energy expenditure, stretching and mobility, sleep, things like that, before I get into allowing my natural or default feelings of worry of being underachieving in some area, that makes sense. So that's kind of like
Yeah.
my current process is just making sure that I'm taking into account all of the things I could change from, like, being very realistic about the way that I'm living my life first before I go applying my trauma narratives that I'm uprooting right now in my mind.
Yeah, and that may be where I differ from you in terms of my opinion around the entry point. And you said you like to start with mind, you should start in the mindset. I really think it has to be both at the same time, pretty much. I think we need to address our thoughts, but if we are not fueling, if we are not resting, if we're not sleeping, if we're feeding ourselves crap, if we're super stressed out and overloaded, if we're not moving through the day, it is going to be such an uphill battle to change your mental state that I think if you're in a place of wanting to improve your life with any kind of goal, even if it's not necessarily a goal, you just want to feel better in your body, you need to approach both and maybe finding just one thing in each area. Like, is there a mindset shift you can make, which that's something you're already doing, being able to step outside and look at your story. But for listeners, like, maybe start getting in that mindset of recognizing thoughts and tracing back emotional reactions to the thought that preceded them. But also, what's one thing you could be doing from a body standpoint to help support that process? Because if all of those other things are lacking, you're going to, in order to conserve energy, you're going to fall back into old patterns because you just don't have the resources to start creating new patterns that take so much intentionality, so much practice, so much focus. And if you're just like in survival mode, fight or flight, and you're not taking care of your body whatsoever, you can have every intention possible of, I want to change my story and I want to have a positive mindset and I want to whatever, I want to change my mind. But you're so exhausted and underfueled. It's such a hard task that I see this with people I work with a lot. They get so hard on themselves when they're like, oh, I was at this Memorial Day. Okay. I was at my family's cookout and, it was really fun, but there was a lot of family around and, things are kind of weird with my mom. And, I had this strange conversation. My husband and I kind of got in a fight before the cookout. And, then I got there and I like had the best intention. I was like, I'm just going to have like one hot dog without a bun and I'm going to have some watermelon. And then like, I don't know what happened, but I got there and I ended up having like two burgers. And then I was just like, fuck it. Let me have some beers. And it's like, it doesn't even matter now. And then they're so ashamed. And I'm like, back up. Look at all the stress you were under. Like, it was everything you could possibly do to stay grounded. Of course, you went back into old patterns. You didn't have anything like supporting you to make changes. Making changes takes a lot of resources. It takes so much focus. And if your focus is split between all these stressors, it's going to be really hard to deal with. So, like, having that grace for yourself, like you're saying, recognize where trauma's coming into it, where old patterns, like especially relationships with other people, are coming up and really kind of sucking from your energy because you're in this defense mode. But, you know, I think it's just this back and forth where neither one is necessarily more important. It's just, I think at different times and different seasons of our life, we recognize in order to create balance, I need to be focusing a little bit more on the thoughts that I'm having. Oh, I need to be pouring into my body a little bit more. And then over time, if you get into a daily reflection process, you're able to make a lot smaller changes from day to day and say, okay, today I'm going to drink more water. Okay, today I'm going to make sure that I meditate. Okay, today I'm going to make sure that I get cardio in. Today I'm going to make sure I rest, and like finding what that looks like from day to day, just based on what you learned from the day.
Yeah, I wanted to read, I just looked up that definition of good health from that podcast we listened to that really resonated because I think you're right. I think absolutely, if we're not taking care of our basic human needs, sleep, nourishment, those kinds of things, how can we possibly even think we're going to be able to access rational thinking? I totally hear you with that. I definitely agree that both need to be being addressed at the same time. And the reason that I want to read this definition is because I think she puts it in a statement that very readily helps somebody understand how to be aware of where physical basic human needs could be lacking, but also how, regardless, your mental patterns are going to be creating your experiences. So both need to be taken into account at the same time. And she says that good health is no fatigue, a good appetite, good sleep, good memory, good humor, precision in thought and action, being humble, in love, and grateful. And then she says, your own mental patterns are constantly creating your own life experiences. The same mental patterns are contributing to the ease and dis-ease in the body. So what I'm hearing from that connects very deeply to this is dis-ease in the body or disease in the body is actually this really incredible learning tool. Our bodies are like letting us know that there's something that's off that we need to address, whether it's from you're physically not sleeping, you're not fueled enough, so your body thinks it's in this famine, or your thoughts and beliefs are so rooted in either it's old patterns of behavior, someone else's beliefs of what's important. Those patterns are not only creating disease or discomfort or stress or, like what you're saying, these areas of tension, it's also then directly impacting the world you live in, which in itself then creates this unhealthy being.
And everything that she said was a combination between the physical and the mental. And I think that's exactly what we're talking about in this series is there's an interplay between them all. And we have access to all three parts, mind, body, spirit. And it's, I think, our responsibility. We were gifted with our bodies. It was the first thing we ever had. And it's really the only thing we'll ever have on this earth that's truly fully ours. And it's our responsibility to take care of it. And taking care of it is not just working out, not just eating, not just mindset, not just emotional health. It's all the things. And it's not about being perfect all the time. We're never fully in balance. I truly think that we won't experience what real balance looks like until we come back, right? Till the end of our lives. I think that's when we will understand what it's like to be fully in balance at all times. But I think we can make a lot of progress towards that and just continuing to pour into all three of these areas and openly, objectively, graciously reflecting on how we're showing up and how we can continue to show up even better for ourselves in these areas.
Yeah, I think that's a good, what do you think about that being a pretty good place to leave them with today and being able to dive into a little bit more specifics, tools, things that you can actually do, and maybe you can address a little bit more of how maybe you walk through your check-in sheet or something like that, where you talk a little bit about how you're addressing the physical body from that standpoint. And then we can also talk a little bit more about the specifics of the mind as well, and how the mind and body are communicating from an emotional trauma standpoint and an overall polyvagal, maybe some polyvagal theory information.
Yeah, that's great. Definitely don't want to overload you guys with too much, but this week, as you go through your week, just start thinking about how your mind and body are interplaying. And each day, find an opportunity, set a goal at the beginning of the day. What's one thing you can do for your mind, approaching things from that perspective? What's one thing you could do for your body? And then every day, just find that one opportunity and watch how really it shifts your whole life. Next week, we'll get into more specifics so we can add in some practices, kind of go over some of the things Dee said, and really kind of build off of this concept of the body being able to shape the mind and vice versa.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for listening. Please remember to like, subscribe, share, comment. We love feedback. So if you have any questions or comments, you can always comment down below if you're watching on YouTube, or email us. Our emails are in the description. And we will catch you next time on Time Under Tension.